Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. You're listening to the Vinnie Eastwood Show. It's the lighter side of genocide, because in a world so full of chaos and madness, if you lose your sense of humour, you go frickin' nuts! And my very special guest is Joe Trinder, and we're going to talk about some candidates and some policies from the Mana Party. Now, this would be interesting, because I always like to hear about people's backstories and what they're actually, it's almost like you could be forgiven for forgetting there's an Auckland election going on right now. Is there much public interest out there, Joe?
Oh, definitely, it's huge. This is probably one of the biggest local elections ever in the history of Auckland, because it's now the super city, so it affects about 1.5 million people. So this vote here is probably just as important as voting in the general elections for government, because Len Brown, the mayor of Auckland, of the super city, the Lord Mayor, is the second most powerful man in the country under John Key. So it's really important we all get out there and vote. Yeah. What I'll do is I'll explain to you some of the cities overseas that have free public transport. There's Chengdu in China has free public transport. And also in Tallinn, the capital of Estonia, in January this year, they also managed to get free public transport. And one of our candidates, Roger Fowler, he went over to a conference on free public transport over in Tallinn in Estonia. And they had big meetings. People from Chengdu turned up as well. And the economic benefits of free public transport were huge. It injected money into the economy. People were on time to work. There was less loss of production because they'd ungridlocked all the streets. So people who didn't want to get around in cars could just get on public transport, and it saved absolute millions and millions invested back into the economy that they could spend on more roads if they needed to.
So basically, the thing about free and public, the thing about just easing congestion in general, is it stops people being delayed in what they got to go and do. Let's say you're a delivery person or whatever, and your job takes an extra half an hour because of frickin' Auckland traffic. How much more money could you make collectively across an entire city for everybody who has to commute, where suddenly that commuting buzz, that congestion doesn't exist, and productivity is free to flow? The benefits could be unbelievable. Like, imagine that. I remember when I used to commute, what is it, like an hour and a half about in a car? For a trip that should have taken, 30, 40 minutes every single day for an entire year. Mate, imagine the savings of time, of money. Because it also burns even extra gas when you're just sitting there idling, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, that's right, yeah. So one of the other parts that we've got to complement that policy is we also want to put free wireless internet on it. So if you're there with your smartphone and you can sort of just go to your favorite websites, it's all free. And so going to work, instead of spending an hour fighting through traffic, trying to get through traffic, you're going to end up at work having just read the Herald and relaxed. And it's an easier day for you because you're not driving, you're not fighting through traffic. You're just sitting on a bus, reading the Herald, taking it easy. And so companies are going to get higher productivity out of their employees as well, who are not coming to work stressed after an hour's battling through traffic.
Or late into the office because, the traffic was just terrible today. Because have you noticed when it rains? Whenever it rains, most Aucklanders who normally use public transport suddenly go back to their cars.
Well, precisely. People are going to turn up to work on time because the ones who do take their cars, they're not going to be stuck in traffic gridlock, and also the ones that take public transport are going to time it better. They're going to know the times of their bus, train, etc. So it's really good policy, and I think it's been really well thought out. And I think that...
Well, you talked about these examples like Estonia and so on and so forth. Are there any numbers or figures or kind of things of a deeper detail that we can look into these examples? Because if we're talking about time and productivity, I mean, do they know exactly how much they got back per dollar invested?
From what Roger said, the whole economy uplifted. There was absolutely millions and millions, and this is just since January that they started that in Tallinn, Estonia. So we've got an example of a similar size city, approximately about 1 million to 1.5 million, and it's a complete success. And we're choosing not to adopt this. It's just, I don't understand. Why not?
Okay, so there's the one policy, and there's got a lot of good points in there. What about your candidates? Who else have you got behind you? Because Roger Fowler, I know, was a leader of Kia Ora Gaza for a time. He actually led kind of like a convoy, a New Zealand delegation sort of into Gaza at one point. And who else have you got? Because John Minto's a veteran protester. He's been basically a figure of protesting aficionado since the Springbok tour in the 80s. And then you got Hone Harawira, of course, but he's not running in this local election, is he?
Yeah, no, he's not, but he's fully supporting us, Hone. But I'll explain our candidates. For the mayoral candidate, we've got John Minto, and he helped defeat apartheid in South Africa and the Halt All Racist tours. So this man knows how to mobilise people. He fought against Rob Muldoon and the national government and disrupted oppression and racism so it couldn't enjoy a mere sports game. Roger Fowler, Roger with Will Ilalia, he helped Pacific Island migrants when the police squad, they had a red squad called a red police squad, they were hunting down Pacific migrants during what we call the Dawn Raids. And Roger was also at Bastion Point with Joe Hawke. He even got married there. And Roger has actually been punched up by Sir Robert Muldoon, the former Prime Minister of New Zealand.
Oh, that's a badge of honour.
I know, mate. It is. Yeah. And but Roger's always fighting for the little man. People at Gaza Strip, he's always there fighting for good causes. He's a great man. We also have another candidate, a Samoan candidate called James Papali. In 1981, at the Halt All Racist tours, James stood face to face, fearlessly, in full body armour against the police Red Squad in a violent confrontation where he stood his ground without fear, mind you. And there's a historic photo of James where he faced right up to the Red Squad by himself, just standing right there. And there's tear gas going off, and he just fearlessly stood up to them. We've also got another candidate, Kayla Filamahala. She's a 18-year-old young Tongan teenage girl. And what she wants to do is she wants to help our young people in the community get engaged, because the future of Auckland are the youth, the young people of Mangere, Otahu and South Auckland. And we need to invest in them. And myself, I'm the tangata whenua candidate for Māori, or as we say, people of the land here in New Zealand. And I'm of Ngāti Awa descent. And I believe that us Māori, we've got a contribution to make to the super city, and we can contribute as well. And some of our policies that we've got that you would find really good is we want to build 20,000 council homes in Auckland. So we want them to be cheap and affordable. And what this will do is it'll force down all of the rental prices, because here in Auckland, rental prices have just gone, it's unbelievable. It's impossible to live here almost, because the price of housing is it's extraordinary.
Everybody's coming to Auckland. I think it's something like out of 50,000 immigrants we have in a year of a country of 4 million people. That's quite a lot, isn't it? I think about 40,000 of them settle in Auckland, and we're only building about 30,000 houses a year, and there's like a shortfall of like a huge amount anyway. It's actually really hard for some people to even find somewhere to live.
Yeah, the hardest people it is on people who are first home buyers. It's absolutely impossible for them to find an affordable house because we've got very wealthy migrants coming in, snapping up all the houses and not renting them out. They're just investment properties that they get on cheap loans from international banks. So it's housing has gotten out of control in Auckland City especially, and there's no distribution of business across the country. So
yeah, I think this is one of the interesting parts about this. And have you heard of the Chinese ghost cities? Yeah,
I've heard about in one North Korea next to the border. There's a ghost city.
No. I'm not sure you understand. You know, a city the size of Seattle or Chicago or Auckland or something like that. The Chinese government goes into the middle of nowhere and builds the whole city from scratch. Right? They got dozens and dozens of them. You can go Google search the images on your computer, man. It is freaking unbelievable. They have these massive metropolitan areas where nobody has moved into yet. And I was just wondering, how exactly are we going to solve the population issue in Auckland? We're talking about projected virtually endless growth, but I'm not sure that there are going to be many viable alternatives, because it looks like the city's being forced into a sort of Agenda 21, sort of pack 'em and stack 'em, slave blocks next to bloody train tracks kind of lifestyle. And that's not New Zealand culture, bro. That's just, that's like fitting in with the globalist culture of the world. Everybody's got that kind of sort of thing to deal with now, man. Not in New Zealand, bro.
I'm really glad that you touched on that point, Vinny, because just recently in Glen Innes, they went and demolished a whole lot of state houses where very poor people lived. And so what they could do is hand this land over to property developers so they would have a nice seaside sort of mansion there and stuff. But the thing is, what they're doing with this is they're rolling it out all across the country. Glen Innes was only the first of many. They're going to be doing that here in Mangere. Every single community that's not as wealthy as their own communities is going to get demolished and turned into whatever they want. And they're going to roll this across the nation. And we need to be prepared for this.
Oh, yeah, we do. And people need to watch their local leaders very fracking closely. When Glen Innes happened, you know what they did? They paid them $100, just $100 to come to this meeting and so on and so forth. You know, free booze, free food, whatever. And then it was like almost invite only of all of the little community leaders around the Glen Innes. You know, even the people from Marae and other groups. And they basically just paid him to give him the okay to do it, as long as they'd get a little bit of a slice of the pie.
Oh, were you there and amongst that, Vinny, were you?
No. I interviewed these ladies out in GI like a year or two ago, and they weren't invited, but they managed to get their way in. And they saw this entire meeting take place, and apparently that's common practice as well. This whole frickin' country, like, if people frickin' knew just how unbelievably corrupt it is. Okay, look, just imagine for a moment that your Prime Minister isn't actually like John Key or somebody wearing a suit or whatever. Okay, just imagine for a moment. He's Robert Mugabe. Okay. All right. Now you suddenly understand just how corrupt kind of the infrastructure is, the cops on the street, and so on and so forth. You know, I mean, that's about as close as an example as I can say, because we have a good veil in this country, a veil of officialdom and colour of law. These people think that they can get away with things just by telling people that they're an authority figure, and then everybody goes, oh, okay, you're an authority figure. Okay, I'll do exactly whatever you say. You say you've got some kind of statute that I've never seen or never even heard of, and that means that I have to destroy my own home or my business or something like that. Okay, you're an authority figure, no worries. And unfortunately, that hasn't led us into a very good place at all. Has it? You know? People accuse me of being unprofessional. As far as I'm concerned, bro, the world is currently run by professionals. How's that working out for you?
Not the best, no.
Yeah. Some people with some life experience would be very nice. Like a whole group of activists who formed a political party to actually take care. Have you noticed what I know about activists, man? A lot of people don't know what an activist is. An activist is a person who actually takes a personal responsibility for the safety of the human race. And they'd study extremely hard, harder than any university student, for longer. They spend their life at it until they know things that would shock even me. We'll be right back after the break at thevinnieeastwoodshow.com. And they also know solutions. Back in a minute.
Because Len Brown, the mayor of Auckland, of the super city, the Lord Mayor, is the second most powerful man in the country under John Key. So it's really important we all get out there and vote. Yeah. What I'll do is I'll explain to you some of the cities overseas that have free... Oh, definitely, it's huge. This is probably one of the biggest local elections ever in the history of Auckland, because it's now the super city, so it affects about 1.5 million people. So this vote here is probably just as important as voting in the general elections for government. Free public transport. There's Chengdu in China has free public transport. And also in Tallinn, the capital of Estonia, in January this year, they also managed to get free public transport. And one of our candidates, Roger Fowler, he went over...
Candidates and some policies from the Mana Party. Now, this would be interesting, because I always like to hear about people's backstories and what they're actually, it's almost like you could be forgiven for forgetting there's an Auckland election going on right now. Is there much public interest out there, Joe? Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. You're listening to the Vinnie Eastwood Show. It's the lighter side of genocide, because in a world so full of chaos and madness, if you lose your sense of humour, you go frickin' nuts! And my very special guest is Joe Trinder, and we're going to talk about